Story 1. Eloquent but irrelevant today. Revolutions are not fought and won by people who are as addicted to comfort and convenience as the vast majority of Americans are, regardless of how upset they may claim to be. Story 2. I believe the general sentiment is that most Americans share these feelings. However, there is a significant portion of Americans who support the government. Therefore, I don't think this applies in the current political climate. Story 3. Washington's address argued for a careful foreign policy of friendly neutrality that would avoid creating implacable enemies or international friendships of dubious value, and refrained from entangling the United States in foreign alliances. Washington had initially considered retiring from the presidency after his first term in office. In 1792, he asked James Madison to compose a valedictory address to be delivered at the end of his first term. However, Washington was persuaded by Alexander Hamilton, former Secretary of State Edmund Randolph, and other political leaders to remain in office for a second term, so the draft remained unused. As he neared the completion of his second term, Washington turned to Hamilton to edit Madison's draft. Hamilton enlarged the portion related to foreign affairs and updated it to reflect the Washington administration's revised neutrality policy. Washington then amended Hamilton's version and sought the opinions of Secretary of State Timothy Pickering on the address. Washington arranged for the address to be published in Claypool's American Daily Advertiser, a Philadelphia newspaper, on September 19, 1796. The address was widely reprinted in newspapers throughout the country. Although the address also dealt with domestic issues, Washington was interested in outlining future U.S. foreign policy. He expressed his views on foreign relations with a warning against permanent antipathies against particular nations, as well as a passionate attachment of one nation for another. He argued that the first would lead to unnecessary wars, while the second would result in unwise treaty concessions, which could arouse the ill will of other countries expecting fair treatment. Washington counseled the public to be wary of foreign influence. He advocated for impartial commercial treaties but opposed treaties of permanent alliance, although the United States should fulfill any existing agreements with perfect good faith. Temporary alliances would be acceptable in extraordinary emergencies. This perspective feels more relevant today than discussions of revolution. Story 4. I believe you all need to move forward with this. You have been discussing this threat since 2016. Story 5. Okay, well, originally the government didn't have weapons capable of microwaving your intestinal tract inside your body. Story 6. Those who signed the Declaration of Independence included that in the document, but when it came to signing the Constitution, they omitted the provision for a no-confidence vote to remove a destructive or dysfunctional government. Story 7. It may be a right, but that right is quite abstract compared to the military and technological advantages of the government. Story 8. Americans have become complacent. We have become comfortable with the instability of our government and its impact on our lives. Why? It's easier to endure and hope for someone else to take action until it directly affects you. Story 9. Trump wanting the original copy of the Declaration of Independence in his office is the scariest thing I have heard so far, and there are many to choose from. However, I have no doubt he would like to make some changes, starting with We the People. Story 10. Americans, for the love of God, stop pretending to be revolutionaries and wait for the upcoming midterms. I am European Canadian and strongly oppose the current administration in the United States, but insurgencies against an elected government rarely end well for democracy or for individuals. If you intend to challenge the current administration, pursue legal action and remove their supporters in local elections. Protests are also important. Consider calling for a general strike. Do not resort to violence. It is a terrible idea for everyone involved. Story 11. I believe you spend too much time on Reddit if you think America is anywhere near needing this. Story 12. I will not align myself with individuals who praise assassins and laugh at those who died during COVID-19. Snitching on church services and actively calling for violence has led platforms like Reddit to implement new policies and ban extreme ideologies. It's been 4 years. We will endure. Story 13. The majority of people who voted in the last election supported the individuals currently in power. To abolish or establish a new government, the public would need to reach a consensus that the previous one should be removed. We are not at that point. Story 14. It is absolutely true, and it is why all the complaints about how Trump is destroying our democracy fall on deaf ears. This is the revolution. Story 15. Well, it's not like there will be forced imports of tariffed goods requiring people to dress up as government officials to dump Teslas into the Boston Harbor or anything. Story 16. It's more likely that this would help Trump than it would hurt him. He has the military, and his supporters have civilian firearms. Story 17. I think it is still valid. That being said, the people's choice in the past election was Donald Trump, and you have to accept that even if you do not approve personally. Story 18, go ahead. The American Revolutionary Men died fighting for that, and they only barely won their cause because Britain couldn't be bothered anymore. The Confederacy lost in a war that killed more Americans than any other conflict. Winning a revolution against the United States federal government today would be extraordinarily costly. Story 19. This is literally what just happened in the 2024 election. Under what we call the Biden administration, we had absolutely no idea who was in charge of anything. We had no idea who was making decisions concerning Ukraine or domestic policy. It certainly wasn't him. That is all we know. Meanwhile, the border was opened. Absolutely anyone who wanted to get here was allowed to do so. No one voted for that. The democratically passed law prohibits that. But it didn't matter. Whoever was in charge allowed it to happen. Meanwhile, saying obvious things like boys cannot become girls and girls cannot become boys became classified as hate speech. Cowardly online platforms decided to become the arbiters of truth. Given that these organizations are controlled by people from the Bay Area, they use their positions within these companies to silence or economically harm any critics of the Biden administration or the social direction of our country. Institutions supposed to serve justice instead attempted to imprison political opponents. Whether through a deliberate conspiracy or gross negligence, the Secret Service allowed a gunman, seen patrolling a political candidate's speech forum with a rangefinder, to linger for several hours, access a roof, and take many shots. Left-controlled academic institutions profited greatly from the democratic regime. Harvard University has an endowment of over $54 billion. But the United States still gave it money anyway. In exchange, scientists validate false information and disseminate theology disguised as science. The users of online platforms represent most of these interests, the interests of the laptop class and their belief in the right to govern everyone else. The goal is to displace democracy with decisions being made by experts or the science. That has been rejected. At any other time, we would be seeing a wave of executions. In our modern time, it appears that this revolution will be bloodless. But it is absolutely a revolution. And if this so-called resistance continues, there is no guarantee that this matter will not escalate until the will of the people is fulfilled. Story 20. I expect the walls to come crashing down on Make America Great Again voters. When they realize how little Donald Trump and his enablers care about them and actively want to make their lives worse, I will laugh. Yes, this current form of government is more like a macabre circus run by monkeys. It will end with blood or tears. Story 21. I think the United States is too large. Nothing gets done because it's too big and the various regions and cultures are so vastly different that we spend most of our time on cultural conflicts instead of not harming each other, either accidentally or purposefully. This is, of course, by design following Project 25. So let Texas fend for itself. Let New England become a technology, medicine, and education hub. Maybe one day we can have a European Union-type situation with the rest of the technology regions. Story 22. Quit whining. The winner of the most votes is doing what he was elected to do. My God, the hysteria of the left. Story 23. That is why Trump was elected again. Things had become intractable. He was hired for his ability to sidestep convention and break the logjam. If it doesn't work, then a complete revolution is the only viable way forward. Story 24. People are complaining because their team lost the election. That's all this is. They won't blame their team because it's their team, and others will turn against them. Story 25. I believe that rights are not truly rights if they can be arbitrarily taken away. It is more accurate to refer to them as privileges. They are gone now. Story 26. Unfortunately, the wealthy control the written word through slowly dying newspapers. They control the spoken content via television and radio. They also manage most of the news and social content through computer technology. The actual control of content is being held by fewer and fewer individuals. The influence that a small number of Republican leaders possess amounts to millions and even billions of dollars. Their direct influence extends to millions of voters. It will become increasingly difficult to distinguish between what is true and what is propaganda. We are gradually becoming a nation of dictators, and a growing number of people are accepting this reality. Story 27. It is unfortunate, but I think we are making progress. We are pushing in the primaries and at the grassroots level. The hope is that, state by state, senator by senator, and representative by representative, we can chip away at the issues that have plagued the U.S. government. In the meantime, we hope that the Supreme Court upholds the U.S. Constitution and prevents a dictatorship from forming. I know the lower courts are trying to keep up with the ongoing challenges, and so far they appear to be managing. Could they mean we need to arm ourselves and remove those causing issues? Perhaps. But they have also provided us with a process, allowing everyone to have a voice. I can only hope that this situation leads to a change in minds and hearts and that enough young people get involved in politics at the local, county, and state levels. Over time, we may be able to return to a sense of normalcy. If circumstances worsen, and borders are closed and martial law is enacted, we hope there will be another country willing to help our citizens, just as we have helped others. In the meantime, for those of you saying, the citizens should do something, please tell us what you think we should do. Story 28. Sounds great in theory. How do we replace it and who gets the most seats at the table? I doubt today's political polarization would allow for a balanced discussion for compromise and decorum. Story 29. Yes, that is relevant when there is no constitution ratified by the people. Do you really need historical context to understand why the Declaration of Independence doesn't apply to a society that is already independent? There is a reason we have Section 2(1)(a) of the Constitution. Overthrowing or reforming the government is allowed, but not through violence and sedition. The Constitution establishes the means by which we regularly overthrow the government, through elections and, as of 1951, a two-term presidency. Story 30. We only care about our phones, the Kendrick and Drake feud, and whether our Wi-Fi or electricity goes out. Story 31. Colonists no longer wanted to live under a monarchy at the time this was written. I suppose if citizens today wanted to replace the republic with another form of governance, they could do so. However, realistically, it would be exceedingly hard to achieve for a variety of reasons. Story 32. My answer is similar to the conclusion of Charlie Chaplin's speech from The Great Dictator. As long as men die, liberty will never perish. Story 33. Can I do this with Keir Starmer's government in the UK? He has been awful in his term so far. He is going to single-handedly destroy our country. Story 34. What do you think about it? Especially given the current political climate, I think you should slow down. Story 35. The difference between then and now? Back then, revolutionaries controlled the means of war. Today, the government controls the means of surveillance. The game isn't about force anymore. It's about visibility. The moment you even think about organizing, you are already flagged. Story 36. Keep in mind this was written in a letter to the British monarchy telling them to leave. Its principles are integral to the Constitution, but the United States' founding principle was not an anarchist state that encouraged violent uprisings. It is the idea that the state serves the people, and if they are not doing so effectively, the officials can be removed peacefully by the people. This is a subjective opinion, but in my estimation, many were convinced that this experiment would fail miserably, which is why the militia wording was added to the Second Amendment. The Federalists did not object because firearms were seen as a necessity. This term literally did not have meaning until the United States Congress was established, illustrating how fundamental this change was. We allow modern language to cloud our assumptions and forget how revolutionary this period actually was. Interestingly, The concept of an independent government agency was developed after the Constitution was written. Story 37. This is exactly what the right wants. This is the goal of accelerationists within the right, pushed by the Council of National Security. Christians voted for Trump to bring about a Christian nation. They do not care about democracy and would prefer a Christian fascist state. The crumbling of America would not be captured by the Democrats. They are largely ineffective and complacent, but by Christian fascists who have been working towards this for decades. The best possible outcome in this situation would be 3 countries post-breakup: West Coast, Northeast, and the rest. Story 38. I think it is naive and idealistic. People will overthrow a tyrannical government only to install another tyranny in its place, and the cycle will continue. Such is the nature of the impermanent world in which we live, with lives dictated by changing governments and cultural norms. Story 39. It is a righteous expression of popular sovereignty. Unfortunately, it feels wholly incompatible with our current social and political moment. People are too isolated and too far removed from any real sense of community to engage in collective action beyond transient protests. Enduring coalitions do not exist and do not appear feasible at this time. Story 40. I think it would be incredibly ironic if the self-righteous Democrats were the ones to instigate a civil war again. An unpopular Republican president may have to commit heinous war crimes in order to win the war again. The history books conveniently leave out the war crime aspects and portray that Republican president as a true hero, build monuments in his image, and display his face all over currency. You keep discussing 1939, you should be talking about 1861. Story 41. I think it's much needed right now, but I also believe it was well thought out, hence the social division that has influenced the world to remain strictly divided. Had all the people been on the same page or not felt indifferent towards one another as they do nowadays, then we, as a collective, could choose to start a petition that might change things regarding our government. We need to make ourselves heard. It's out of reach now. There's too much hate. They have won. Story 42. I find it strange that the group of right-wing gun owners, known for their strong beliefs, is conceding in the face of actual tyranny. If the world made any sense, supporters of the Second Amendment would be joining forces with those on the political left to oppose the dictatorship. Story 43. Una mattina, mi sono alzato e ho trovato l'invasore. Story 44. I believe the world would be a better place if Moscow and Beijing practiced what they preach in their psychological operations, rather than attempting to manipulate others into doing so while they continue to abuse their own citizens and neighbors. Story 45. Americans aren't even protesting in meaningful numbers. There's no uprising, revolution, or reform coming. As bitter as it may seem, people apparently don't want to rise up or have closed their eyes to all the telltale signs for so long that now they find themselves in a world where they no longer dare to act. Either way, this has all been long coming and has repeatedly been supported by roughly a third of the population. Story 46. I'm worried that when we reach that point, people won't recognize it and will wait until it's impossible to turn back. Story 47. We have a legal process to alter and abolish the government by amending the Constitution. It is, by design, very difficult. Legally speaking, one could completely abolish the entire U.S. Constitution through the amendment process. If you are suggesting extrajudicial means of altering the form of governance, I have 2 words for you. First. If you are not willing to be first, please stop talking bravely from behind a keyboard where you will face no consequences. Stop calling for others to take up arms, kill, and die when you are not willing to do so. If you do not think we have reached that point yet, stop telling others that we have. Story 48. Be cautious when asking these types of questions, as you may be flagged by Reddit administrators for promoting violence or harm against those in power. Story 49. This is why Trump wants the Declaration of Independence in his office, where the public cannot see it. Story 50. Thomas Jefferson wrote in a letter to James Madison in 1789 that a constitutional convention should be held approximately every 19 to 20 years so each generation could revise the Constitution to meet its needs. He stated, "The earth belongs to the living. I have often considered, long before Donald Trump or the Bush versus Gore case, that this was the original issue that has led us to our current situation. Story 51. We should declare independence from the United States in New Jersey or other states can do the same and ask Donald Trump to lead them so we can hold a new election. That is all it should be. You cannot just break the Constitution. Story 52. The portion of Americans who are inclined to read the Declaration of Independence and express concern are already upset. The rest? I doubt they would care if Trump personally set their house on fire. They would likely say he was just trying to keep them warm. Story 53. I believe American citizens today, and perhaps since at least World War I, have not had what it takes to abolish a destructive government. I have seen more outrage over the idea of TikTok being banned than over anything the government has done or intends to do. Story 54. Well, with all the restrictions on the Second Amendment, what are the people going to do? Hold up signs in Congress? Story 55. Did Donald Trump win the popular vote? I understand that it is the silent minority who scream the loudest on social media, but having American friends through various platforms, it seems like most are just getting on with life. Story 56. I agree with the statement, but the fact is it was not written with any consideration for women or black individuals. Story 57. In the long run, good old Thomas Jefferson hit it right on the head. Bad governance is detrimental, and there is no reason to permit it. Like everything else, how you change or eliminate a government is the challenging part. Story 58. The problem is America hasn't had a proper leader in almost a century. We are a nation of figureheads and opportunists. Story 59. It is ironic how you are expressing patriotism now, but there were no concerns when individuals were undermining our country over the past 4 years. Story 60. Just like in 1776, it will take a group of wealthy individuals facing adversity to initiate change. Currently, all the wealthy individuals are supporting the harmful government. Story 61. Cheeto Schittler is in the process of attempting to take away our inalienable rights. I will protest and vote for the Democratic Party in all upcoming elections, but there is not much else we can do at the moment. Story 62. I hope my predominantly blue state gets a Democratic governor. If the state is in good shape, it is a bit more comforting. The Deep South states can separate for all I care. It is either that or another civil war. Story 63. The fear of tyranny was that Britain wanted to honor treaties with Native Americans and abolish slavery. Story 64. I'm not going to lift a finger while Comrade Krasnov messes things up. I will sit here and laugh as his supporters slowly realize they have been deceived. Story 65. The missing part is that the old government has the right to defend itself. Revolutions do not require anyone to give their opinion on their legality. They are unlawful by definition. Story 66. I am retired and receiving Social Security. I am available to go to Washington, D.C. at any time. How many retired individuals do you need? I believe 3 million might be willing at this point. Story 67. We used to hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.